You're listening to The Jeff Oravits Show. Be part of the program by calling 877-971-3971.
All right, folks, welcome back. And, I think it's important nowadays to remember people who have had great accomplishments. I mean, we live in a time where we're hearing about so much negativity all the time. And, there's individuals that accomplish so much. And one of those folks happens to be a test pilot. And if you haven't heard of Chuck Yeager, he passed away yesterday, age of 97. And 1923 to 2020, great accomplishments. He was like a rock star when it comes to aviation and test pilots and so much more. And I wanted to bring in a friend of mine, and he was on the program just last week. But I just, as soon as I heard about Chuck Yeager, I was like, I got to talk with Bruce, because Bruce is a licensed commercial pilot, and we were talking about his hot air balloon just last week. Bruce, welcome back to the program. How you doing today?
Hey, Jeff, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. And Bruce Sidlinger, he is, I mean, your balloon story was fun last week, Bruce, and got a lot of hits on that on the podcast. But Chuck Yeager, I mean, he is a rock star. I remember when I was back like in middle school, it was like Top Gun and, the right stuff type of stuff, you think about that. But then Chuck Yeager, John Glenn, Chuck Yeager, people like that who are heroes from already a long time back at that point. But man, he did some tremendous things in the aviation community. Give us the rundown here.
So he did a lot of stuff, and he would have done a lot more, except he just had a high school education, and that's why he wasn't an astronaut. But he was certainly set up for that. And I never knew Chuck Yeager, although our lives did intersect in a couple of ways that I'll mention in a minute. But he was from West Virginia. And the first thing I'll mention is I'm a flight instructor. And one of the things that all flight instructors hear is the first time that their students try out their Chuck Yeager voice. Because every pilot wants to be on the radio like Chuck Yeager. And I don't have a very good one myself. But, there's that kind of drawl and that real low drawl. And, it's kind of like, what you aspire to as a pilot is if you got a problem with an airplane, instead of saying, we're declaring an emergency, and you're supposed to say, we're fixing the problem. It's like that real, you got to get that real relaxed drawl. And that's all from Chuck Yeager.
No, we're all going to die. We're going down. It's all over. Yeah. I mean, so he, let me back up a second, because you and I always talk about education and all of that stuff. And you just said that he missed out on the space program on NASA because he was just high school education.
That is correct. And in fact, he wouldn't have even been a pilot. Chuck Yeager is all of his life kind of surrounds Flagstaff, right? He was California, Arizona, and Nevada for most of what he did. Mm-hmm. And he was originally, he enlisted in the military, but since he didn't have college, he was an aircraft mechanic and not a pilot. And he never would have been able, and he was a mechanic, trying to think where he was a mechanic. But anyway, he was a mechanic, in California.
Okay.
And then when World War II started, the military lowered their standards for pilots. And so he got to go to Luke. And so that's where he learned to fly, was at Luke.
Interesting.
So it wasn't
right here.
It wasn't it wasn't Air Force Base then, because it was Army aviation. But it was like right. Luke Field. Okay. And he, right. And that's where he learned to fly.
Interesting. And then you wonder what would have happened had he been in, NASA in the space program, if they would have, made that exemption for someone who was one of the most, noted and well-known and respected test pilots. You wonder what could have been.
He actually ran the school that trained the pilots. He just couldn't be an astronaut himself.
Interesting.
He was the first commandant of the USAF Aerospace Research Pilot School. And it's what used to be called the Test Pilot School. Yeah. But when they wanted to start training astronauts, they called it the Aerospace Research Pilot School. And so he was even though he ran the whole operation, he was not eligible to be an astronaut because of that high school education.
Well, let's talk real quick, Bruce, and folks, we're talking with Bruce Sidlinger. Chuck Yeager passed away at 97, 1923 to 2020. That's a great long life. I know lots of people are sad, but if anyone can live to be 97 and have this list of accomplishments, I think it's worth celebrating. You know, it's always sad when anyone passes away, but Bruce, like, you know, I want to pass away with, you know, doing stuff and accomplishing stuff. What were some of those accomplishments? Obviously the sound barrier, and maybe talk about that was in the 50s. I don't know the exact date. Or
right.
What was that? I mean, what was that environment like, and what was that accomplishment like?
Well, that was, and so later we should go back and talk about him being a World War II flying ace.
Yeah, we'll go back more. Yeah. Talk about sound barrier first, and then go back to World War II.
But yeah, let's talk about sound barrier. So, you know, that was in the Bell X-1. That was that rocket plane that was dropped off of the wing of a bomber, and and that's actually one of the ways that I know best about him, because a friend of mine who's a director out in Hollywood made a great movie called The Legend of Pancho Barnes, and I gave a little bit of money to that, but then I held a fundraiser at my house. And a lot of rich people came and gave a lot of money to that movie. And that movie is about this lady who was the other Amelia Earhart. She was a very, very distinguished female aviator at the time of Amelia Earhart, but she wasn't as pretty, and so she didn't have that. Nobody knows about her, but she was amazing.
What was her name?
And she, Pancho.
Okay. That's what the movie is about. Pancho.
Yeah, Pancho Barnes.
Pancho Barnes. I had never heard of that, and I
yeah. So
okay.
yeah, in fact, one of my friends, Melissa, was one of the people that gave quite a bit to that movie, and like I said, my friend Nick directed it. And everybody should see that, because in fact, I hope a lot of people that want to remember Chuck Yeager will just go look at that movie. It was a PBS movie, but I think you can, if you just go to IMDb and look for Legend of Pancho Barnes, you can see how to see it.
Yeah, great.
And it's an amazing movie that really tells you a lot about that era. But anyway, Pancho Barnes, since she wasn't since she wasn't as comely a lass as Amelia Earhart, she ended up having this bar for the Edwards Air Force Base, and that bar was the hangout of the test pilots. And there's so many fun stories. And one story, I don't completely have the details, but because there was one episode where people were riding a horse and hit a cactus, but I'm not sure if I'm conflating that with the Chuck Yeager story. But the definitely true parts of the Chuck Yeager story is that he was riding with his wife Glennis, and incidentally, everything he ever flew, he named Glamorous Glennis. So if you ever look at a picture of the X-1,
yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
right. All the planes that he flew, all in the military and everything, he always painted Glamorous Glennis on it, because in the military, Glennis was his girlfriend. Later, they became married, and they were married until 1990 when she passed away. But 2 days before that supersonic flight, and incidentally, the reason Chuck Yeager did that supersonic flight is that the official Bell test pilot at the last minute said he wanted $150,000 in extra pay to do that flight because it was so dangerous. And so then Chuck just said, "Hey, I'll do it for free." Right. So
good idea. Good idea.
Right. So that's how he got to do it. Anyway, 2 days before that flight, he was riding with Glennis and they near the Pancho Barnes's bar was called the Happy Bottom Riding School. And so he had a big horse accident and he broke some ribs. And of course, in the military, you could have a hangnail and you'd be scrubbed from a mission, right? So he couldn't tell anybody. He had the doctor tape those ribs up. And he only confided in one other test pilot who was going to be up in the bomber, that day to help Chuck get into the rocket plane. And so because the way it worked is the rocket plane was attached to the bomber and when you were ready to fly the rocket plane, you kind of crawled down into it, and then you had to close this hatch, and then it dropped away from the bomber. And so
that's great. Just that in itself, Bruce, is like who does that?
Yeah, who does that,
would you
right?
do that? I mean, you're a pilot of just about all things. Would you do that?
I would do it. I would do it. I have, what's funny? It's like I'm afraid of some things, but I am not afraid of anything like that.
Yeah.
Like for example, I would totally do, since I've got a couple hundred skydives and stuff. I would totally do one of those jumps from a capsule, from space, where you jump with the parachute. I mean, whenever I see something like that, I just say, oh yeah, that'd be fine, and I wouldn't experience any fear. But meanwhile, I'll be scared of going to the dentist, right? So it's like everybody has their things, but nothing about.
We're not very rational beings.
Right. I've never been scared in an aviation context, really. Other than, sometimes I recognize that I might be about to die, but that just focuses me. Those are my best.
Yeah, you have to if you're going to be in that situation. Okay, so he climbs in this thing, they drop it off the wing, and they shoot it off. And
yeah, but he climbs in it, but he can't close the hatch because of his broken ribs. And so his friend, the only other person who knows, the doctor who taped him up knows, and his wife knows, and the only other person who knows is this friend who's assisting him.
Okay.
And so they take a broomstick and break it, make it short, and hand it down to Chuck, and then Chuck uses that broomstick to push the hatch closed. Oh, so that's how hurt he was. He couldn't close the hatch otherwise. Yeah. But he was extremely competitive, and he wanted to break the sound barrier. And then there was an episode later in his life when another test pilot broke twice the speed of sound barrier. Incidentally, I've been to twice the speed of sound a bunch of times, but that's another story. But anyway, so he broke the twice speed of sound barrier, and so they were going to have a party to celebrate the fastest man alive. Mm-hmm. And then Chuck Yeager very quickly organized a flight to go a little faster. So before this guy could have his party, that's how competitive Chuck Yeager was. Very competitive.
I love that because, I mean, when you talk about people like Chuck Yeager and passed away 97, and we hear a lot nowadays, Bruce, about you can't accomplish things. I know this was a while ago, obviously, and I would argue that just the story you told with the broken ribs is, a different breed of folks almost back then. But there's still folks around like that and people doing this. And it goes to show you what the individual, I know there was a lot of people behind it and behind these things, but there's always seems to be that individual that just takes it and that I don't care if I got broken ribs. I don't care, what the situation is. I'm going to push ahead. And they seem to push everybody with them. And I think we still got that, but I don't know if we have it as much anymore. Maybe we can get back to that.
Well, we have Elon Musk. I mean, he's because in other words, in a different way, these superstars you're talking about are the serial achievers.
Yeah.
And they're usually my response to when people say that CEO pay should be capped or something. I'll say, wait a minute. It's not just the right place at the right time. There are these people that achieve over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's not just dumb luck or
It's not just that this guy was in the right spot at the right time and any citizen plucked off the street would have done it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
they fail too, and they get back up and keep going.
That's right.
Well, I'm gonna have to check out that movie again one more time. Pancho Barnes.
Yeah. So it's called The Legend of Pancho Barnes.
Okay.
And then the subtitle is The Happy Bottom Riding Club.
Okay. I'm going to have to check that out. Maybe The Right Stuff again. Watch that again. You ever watch that one?
I would watch that again too.
Yeah. That's a long one, I think, and I'll have to get that. No, this is good stuff. And then he was in World War II as well, but I'm kind of tight on time, and I just wanted to, at least pay a tribute, Bruce, because I think it's important to remember these folks and these accomplishments. And I would think that in this time of YouTube stars, right, and all that stuff, and these people that they're just famous for being famous kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're just self-appointed stars.
Yeah,
right?
Where it's like, you go hop in that plane or that jet thing, whatever the heck it was, a rocket plane under a wing and go do that. Unbelievable, but. Go ahead.
He was the real stuff.
Yeah, the real stuff. Yeah, absolutely. All right, Bruce. Hey, I appreciate it. Always fun getting updates from you, and we'll see if we can get you in a rocket ship here real soon. All right, Bruce. Appreciate it.
Sure. See you later.
All right, folks. Quick break. Hang tight. Back in a minute.